Welcome to Beyond the Degree webinar series. These sessions are designed to give you the opportunity to connect with alumni from the basic medical sciences departments as they share their unique experiences and their career journeys. We will be running the sessions during the academic year. So if you want to watch previous sessions, and if you want to kind of keep checking on the sessions that we are going to be hosting in the future, I encourage you to review our website, which is already in the chat, so you can receive all notifications about the upcoming webinars. We are so happy that you were able to join us today. I will encourage you to participate and think about how the insights shared today might apply to your own career and pathway. So again, today's session is gonna begin with a presentation from our alumni speaker, Bill Hilson, followed by a live Q&A, where you will have the chance to ask your questions and learn directly from his experience. Really, thank you again for being here today, and I'll stop sharing the screen and you can start your presentation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Maria. I really appreciate that. And welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is William Hilson. I go by Billy. I graduated from Western in 1993, which seems like an eon ago. I met my wife there and a number of my best friends to date, and just had tremendous amount of personal growth and experience at Western during those years. So it's always a pleasure to come back to the Western community. I know there is a number of departmental folks as well as students here, and I know it's a very busy time of the year for students in particular coming up to exams. So I appreciate everyone attending here and listening to my experience and my story. So it's a pleasure. And I would also at the onset here welcome anyone to reach out to me if they want to get in contact through LinkedIn. Please do so. I'm just always excited and engaged to talk about science, to talk about health community and what's going on in career development. So please don't hesitate to reach out. If you can, just note that the connection is coming through this series here, beyond the degree. That'll be helpful for me to connect. Okay, so kicking off, I have, I would say, a unique background, career-wise, education-wise. I started off as a geneticist, neuroscientist, and then combined that with a chartered accountant designation. So became a CA after getting some of my science experiences. My family, friends thought I was crazy, thought I couldn't make a decision as to what I wanted to do with life, all of that good stuff. But I did have a plan. The way I looked at it is I was doing research in grad school, and I had the idea, the concept that I wanted to get on the so-called business side of science. So I figured I need to start building a toolbox to do so. And it was kind of, I would even say silly at the time. I had no idea what this concept, business side of science, even meant. But at the time, it was exciting because had graduated from the genetics program at Western, and I was studying in clinical biochemistry at University of Toronto, and I was working at Sick Kids Hospital, and the Human Genome Project was going on. So it was a really engaging and exciting time. And so I felt a lot of opportunity there. So my challenge to myself was, how do I tackle that, and how do I go about that? So I'll give you a bit about my background and then, what I'm thinking about now and where things are going. Um, so I graduated from Western in 93. It was the second class of the new genetics program. And learned a tremendous amount there, was highly engaged. I had a very active life at Western. I was engaged in a number of social things. Obviously had a lot of classes, 8 o'clock labs in the morning with the genetics program, but really felt at home there, and it really nurtured me to really dive deep into, a lot of technical areas, which excited me. So I graduated from Western in 93, as I said, and then tried to figure out what my next steps were. Figured grad school was a good progression from that. Applied to a number of schools and was fortunate in some regards to get into a very interesting program, but it wasn't necessarily a clean entrance into it. So graduating from the genetics program, and at the time, because of the genome project and everything that was going on, I really wanted to get into molecular genetics at U of T or in some other programs in the US and that. And unfortunately, I did not get into that. And some of that was that I didn't have monies coming in for my own. I was successful at Western, but like I said, I had a balanced life, so I wasn't the on paper the highest quality candidate, but I did get an opportunity at U of T, and it was unique in the sense that um, one of my supervisors, I had two supervisors. One was from the molecular genetics program, but he had already committed to his students, but he had a partner in his lab that they actually were running the clinical genetics lab at SickKids for the hospital. And this guy's name was John Callahan, Dr. Don Callahan, and he was switching over from really, running the lab there at the SickKids, but also from more of pure science into some more applicable science. And at the time, in order to get funding, if you didn't really have applicable application for the work you were doing, it was very difficult to get monies to do your work. Um, John had tenure, and he also had the position at the hospital, and that so they came up with a arrangement where John would fund my research, and then Don Mahurin was the guy in genetics, molecular genetics. He would support all the work that I was doing as well. Um, so I was a bit hesitant because biochemistry was not my first choice, nor was it my best subject. So I went in with some apprehension, but I figured I was up for the task. I figured, like most programs that we can all relate to, in the first week or so, they're going to review everything, and I'm going to learn the Krebs cycle again and all that good stuff. And I'll be really paying attention, and I'll get myself up to speed and not have to worry about things. Well, first class, they came in and they said, "Well, you guys are here. You absolutely know everything you need to know. So we're moving ahead without any review." And so that's when the panic started to hit for me. And it was a small class, but it was quite a diverse class from people all around the world, and obviously very intelligent people in there. So I felt a little overwhelmed. As the classes progressed, what I really started to figure out quickly was that wasn't necessarily about biochemistry per se, but it was really about the clinical element of it. And I had no idea what the words they were using and the nomenclature they were using. And that was my first kind of like gasp. So I said, I need to crack this code. And to me, this is one of the main lessons that I've had in my career is that there's always something that once you understand how it's fitting together, a lot of it times it's nomenclature. Once you understand that and crack that, then you're on your way. And so, in order to do this, and I was, you know, having all of these medical terms thrown at me, I had no idea what they were. I decided I got to find out what this means. And I went to the library and I went to the bookstore and I was looking for a way to be able to get a dictionary, even, simple thinking like that, get a dictionary of how this all fits together. So, I was able to find the nursing guide to medical terminology. I was able to utilize that to understand everything that was happening in this course. And while everyone else was trying to figure out the biochemistry, I was actually figuring out the clinical nomenclature. And lo and behold, I was very successful. I ended up getting perfect at all my exams. I came in with no money, and my supervisors kind of joked about it, saying, I was a good guy, and they liked to have me in the lab, even though I couldn't pay for it. But because of the success I had in being able to so-called crack the code, I was able to get a University of Toronto Open Scholarship, and it really was validating for me that through a methodology and through a learning of really being in a situation where you feel overwhelmed, but if you can step back, take it first principles, understand nomenclature in particular, and the nuances that were going on, and what the task was. This was clinical biochemistry, it was not biochemistry. So that was key for me. So it was a scary start, but it ended up being very critical for my learning and future in the career. Um, I started to go down the path and I started to see that as I was having a lot of success on the bench, I had a number of publications. I was discovering gene mutations for some uh, lysosomal storage diseases in patients and families that were patients at the hospital. I came up with a diagnostic test through PCR to diagnose those mutations within those genetics. And like I said, had publications with that. But I just felt like I wanted something more. And I didn't know what that was. So I started talking to people of what's next and talked to a number of people and decided that going on to the business side of science was where I really felt that I wanted to go. But I didn't know what that meant. And so I came up with the idea that I could become a lawyer with this background instead of writing my PhD, finish a master's thesis, become a lawyer, combine lawyer, a law degree with the science, look at going into management consulting, do an MBA. I was looking at different things, go into industry directly. And I settled on a CA because one, I hadn't seen anyone else do that. Two, that in order to be successful in business, I figured you had to have a financial angle to it and understand how capital markets or funding worked. But you also needed to have a technical background. And in this case, it was in the sciences. So I then, with the support of my supervisors, decided to write my master's thesis. I got a job in the genetics lab working during the day and writing my thesis. And then I was going to York University and got special permission to be enrolled in two universities and started taking accounting courses. And so it was a great experience for me. It was totally different. It was fully engaging and set off to do that. Successfully defended my thesis and got my courses done, and then got a job in a CA firm. And again, another challenge was all the big CA firms at the time or accounting firms at the time. Didn't know what to do with me. Here's a guy who's just finishing up some of these courses, still had a bunch more to do, has a science background. So I kept hitting some roadblocks there. But I was able to, through a network, find a firm that was a smaller but kind of a boutique firm that was willing to take a chance on me. So I went in and started my CA designation, but always with the intent that I was going to get back into the sciences in some way. So biotech was where I was really focused. So after finishing my CA and getting the qualifications, getting my designation, I then went and started, and I was working for a biotech company out of Toronto called Hemasol. And I was hired as a corporate development analyst, and I was really engaged to execute all the contracts that the C-suite was putting in place. So the CFO, the CEO, debt and equity financing. So they saw me more as an accountant, but my interest was always on the lab and the science and the building and the clinical trial. So it did come first through the more finance side of things, but then the two really did converge and into one. So this was a blood replacement company that we were looking to take expired red blood cells, isolate the hemoglobin, stabilize them, and use them in an efficient way. The technology came from the Department of Defense, and we were looking to commercialize that. We were doing clinical trials in the US and Canada and the United States. We were building a large manufacturing facility. We were a publicly listed company, so I was able to cut my teeth on the NASDAQ listing. Everything was really, really just a great opportunity for me. And I learned a tremendous amount there. Lo and behold, the product itself started to have some clinical adverse events and went into a clinical hold. And I got to also learn the side of building up a company and then really downsizing and taking it down as we ran into some of these technical challenges. And then we're also not able to raise money. So from there, I decided I wanted to get onto a real pharmaceutical company, not biotech, one that had revenues. And I was able to join a company called Serono, which was the largest biotech company out of Europe. So similar to like an Amgen or a Genentech in the United States. working all with biologics. I was hired there as a CFO originally out of the Boston office, and then repatriating to a Canadian office. So we were separating and having a direct report. Um, Again, tremendous amount of time. This was, when biologics were really coming into play, and working with both on the research side, also on the commercial side, and really going through the drug development pathway. So that was Serono as a CFO role. And then thought about moving my family and business development over to Geneva. That's where Serono was headquartered out of. But for personal reasons, we decided to stay in Canada. And at that same time, Serono was being acquired by Merck, the German Merck KGA. And I thought there could be some more opportunities there. Considered doing the expat kind of run around the world and then trying to find a place to land and come back home at some point. But I stayed on as the CFO at Merck for a number of years, did special projects, did some M&A work, and kept getting opportunities to move abroad, but it just didn't seem to be the right opportunity for me. So I decided that was a better opportunity for others, and I passed on that. And then I started a management consulting firm after that, when I decided it was best to stay here. And really looking at early stage biotech companies that were starting out, trying to get a strategy around their innovation, get a capital market strategy, get a marketing strategy, decks together and financing. And but at the same time, from my earlier days at Serono and Merck, we had licensed in some products from a French pharmaceutical company. And they were now looking to take those back and start their own shop in Canada. So I supported them as a consultant, getting them set up and running in their office in Canada and that. So did that for a number of years and just decided that uh, hustling for clients, doing the work, getting the billings, collecting the money, all of that was a lot and not with much structure at all. So I said I wanted to get back into the pharma world. And this is one of those situations where be careful what you ask for. But at the time, Purdue Pharma, yes, that Purdue, was looking for a new CFO for their Canadian operations. They were just in the midst of launching Neo, which is the tamper-resistant version, and they were going to pull Oxy off the market. And, in hindsight, we know how that all worked out. I looked at what they were doing. They had a very unique corporate structure around the world, and really try to say there's a bunch of things you need to do to continue. But one of the things you should be considering is divesting out of opioids and into cannabinoids. And this is when cannabinoid research was really starting to take off, and there was like charter challenges coming here in Canada, and specifically around legalization and right to try and charter rights, et cetera. But I felt that there was a real opportunity on the medicinal pharmaceutical side of cannabinoids. So fortunately, I did not get the job at Purdue, but I was had this knowledge because I did a lot of deep research into the cannabinoid space, and set off and was a founding CFO at one of the largest Canadian cannabis firms, which one of the largest multinational ones, really. We were only working in federally regulated legal jurisdictions, licensed jurisdictions. So we had operations in Israel and Poland. We had in Germany, Canada, and but not in the US. It was not federally legal there. So we built that business up. As I said, my focus was on the medicinal pharmaceutical side of it. But we ended up selling in 2018, 2019, 45% of that company to Altria, which is the maker of Marlboro, the tobacco company. With that transaction, we sold 45% of the company to them for like 2.4 billion, so about a $5 billion valuation. Again, just a tremendous learning experience. But I left that in 2019 as they started to put their folks in and really wanted to look at other opportunities. So brings me now to what I'm doing now is at that time, 2019, 2020, we were starting to see a resurgence in the psychedelic space. And there was some discussions going on how psychedelics are the new cannabis 2.0. And based on my experience and what happened there, I was like, no, 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 let's hope not. These are very powerful molecules. There's a lot of innovation, and they've really been in the penalty box for, many, many years on the research side. And if we can combine today's technologies and innovations with these molecules and these drugs, there's a lot of opportunity here, and particularly in the background of not a lot of development had taken place in in psychiatry, and in neurodrug development. There were a lot of failures on the Parkinson side and the Alzheimer's side, but it was really still the SSRIs, the SNRIs, that were really the market leaders. So there was a large unmet need. As important as those drugs are, they come, with some, as most of on this in this call, some pretty severe side effects, and the efficacy isn't there for a large portion of the population. And you have to stay on the drug through that for a while in order to see those efficacies. So there's large unmet need. And so I ended up joining and was a founding investor in a company called Diamond Therapeutics. I'm still there today. I'm now the deputy CEO, working with the founder and a whole very qualified team that we've put together. And we are doing drug development, and we have a phase 2 study going on now in generalized anxiety disorder, where we administer low doses of psilocybin on a daily basis, on an outpatient basis, which is a challenge in itself, getting that approved, but we did with Health Canada. And we're starting to see some very interesting efficacy. So the premise there is that there's neuroplasticity happening. Within the psychedelic space, we see a lot of trials that are happening with high dose use. And, the approach that Diamond has taken is twofold. One is looking at it from a pharmacological point of view. So instead of having the impairment associated with the high doses, with hallucination, out of body experiences, our thinking is that there is really at the bottom, neuroplasticity is occurring and neural networks are being established and strengthening that, which are overcoming, the side effects of anxiety and depressions and these mental health disorders. So can you still get that efficacy of neuroplasticity being developed without the hallucination side effects? And that's kind of the pharmaceutical approach we took, which is effectively microdosing. And we're showing that to be quite effective. We did some early animal studies that we had some eureka moments. We did a proper phase 1 study, and now we have this ongoing phase 2 study. So that's the one side of it. The other side of Diamond is on the medicinal chemistry side. So can we achieve in a non-hallucinogenic way neuroplasticity by manufacturing or engineering molecules similar to some of these classic psychedelics that hit the same serotonin receptor system, potentially in a bias pathway, that would lead to neuroplasticity, will lead to efficacy without incurring a hallucinogenic dose. So there's a whole bunch of sub-receptor systems going on, and I see some of the folks on the call here are doing some work, and just maybe note that Dr. Peter Chidiak is on the call here, I see, and Diamond is doing some work with him out of some money that we've been able to secure. So it's a very interesting space. There's, for me, very important connections to Western as well. And I would also say that um, Diamond is actually just recently also, and we just signed the contract last night, but we have been granted a contract from the US government, uh, Health and Human Services, with a program that is modeled after what is called DARPA, which is Defense Advanced Research Projects, kind of the moonshot secret skunkwork projects of the US military. They've taken that same model and they've now applied it to human health and services. And they've put together a program for looking at biomarkers, and they call this the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, ARPA-H. And Diamond was awarded a contract to collect biomarkers on the data that we're collecting out of our study, our clinical trial study. So we'll be collecting biological samples. We'll be collecting physiological data as well as psychological data through measures, with the intent that looking at rapid onset of these uh, these molecules or these therapeutics and the biomarkers associated with that. I think we're probably the only Canadian company to be granted one of these. There's up to 25 of them. I believe there's probably a handful or maybe a dozen of them that have been granted so far. These are projects that go right up the chain to the Secretary of Health and Human Services to be granted, and it's instant validation for what we're doing at Diamond. So very exciting there, and it's again we're just kicking that off. So there'll be more to come on that. What else am I looking forward to, or what I'm looking to do next? So besides the ARPA contract and continuing what we're doing with Diamond. One of the things that has been interesting me for a long time, and maybe some people on the Zoom call here as well, is really the convergence of neurosciences with AI. And so I've been doing some my own research and thinking about how to best tackle that. And one of the things that I've always been interested in from my early days of graduating from Western and U of T is, where can Canada play a leadership role in this? We don't have a national pharmaceutical company. We've had a few versions of that, but why not? We have the innovation, we have all the universities and the infrastructure to do so. Generally, what ends up happening is there's just not enough funding or commercialization ability, capital for that. But maybe that's not the case for new innovations that are coming, particularly around neurosciences and AI. So I am considering launching a neuro fund, a neuro AI fund, potentially maybe founding a few companies, doing some work like that. So if there's any interest in those areas, please reach out as well. It's very early, but it is something that I'm quite excited about, and I believe that I have the right network to be able to launch something and get something going. So, um, my takeaway on that is, at a very high level, when you think about moonshots and the BHAGs of questions out there, it's like, really, can the human brain match the potential of autonomous AI? And I believe so. And so with that, all the offshoot of, making accessible medicine available to remote areas could be, just one of the side effects that come out of that. So maybe I'll stop there and we can open it up for questions. But I do want to wish everyone um, uh, a successful exam period and heading into the summer, as well as with your career decisions and paths. And, like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you, everyone. And looking forward to questions.
Thank you so much, Billy. That was definitely pretty much interesting. I see clapping in the audience. So I'm going to stop the recording and we can jump into the Q&A.